Hello, sir.
Live from the typhoid ward here in Atlanta, Georgia.
I hear you. I hear you have the COVID.
I do have the COVID. I went to Florida on vacation and came back with a unintended souvenir.
Is that because you were spending a lot of time in close proximity with people without masks, or just because you got
my
unlucky?
Goodness, yes, and mostly Brazilian tour groups. I think one of them licked me, and I came home with something from south of the border. I'm just kidding.
Welcome to the Pilote podcast with David Fuller and Cory Smith. This week, a rapid-fire news tech roundup, total experience for healthcare, the hospital of the future, and Cory goes to Disney World.
2 years diligently washing my hands, sanitizing, wearing masks, and one fail swoop. I go to Disney. I throw caution to the wind in my exuberance to ride the new ride at Disney. And I come home with it. And my wife has it too now. She just took the test yesterday and she has it as well. So we're both here. I don't feel sick at all. I just tired and achy and just not a lot of energy, but no fever, no sniffles, no breathing problems, no sickness at all. Just
what about the
tired?
What about the taste thing? Can you taste?
Nah, none of that. Look, got my Starbucks, enjoying that. Still drinking my coffee. I have no taste problems, no smell problems. I couldn't travel. Obviously, this week I was going to go to the Collision conference in Toronto. Thank goodness my wife was like, "Hey, you better take a test." Because I came home from Florida Sunday night. I got home about 9:30 at night. I immediately unpacked and repacked because my plane left at noon on Monday. So I packed my suitcases and took them downstairs. And then Monday morning I get up and I felt like just mildly icky, like you're worn down after traveling, if you travel, right. You travel a lot.
Yeah.
And my wife was like, you probably should just, on the safe side, if you fly to Canada and you get off the plane there and they test you and you have COVID, you're going to be stuck in Canada for 10 or 12 days. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. Nothing against Canada. They're lovely people. But I want to, if I'm going to be, I was like, well, if I'm going to be sick,
you want to quarantine at home, right?
Yeah, right. So I get up and I took the test, which is right here. Yep. Yeah, I'm holding it up to the microphone. Can you hear this test? And I took the test and it came back positive, and I was in shock. I was like, oh my gosh. So I just had to cancel everything. So I couldn't go to the conference, obviously. Lots to talk about this week, though.
A lot has happened since we spoke last. Last week we were off because you were swanning around on the new rides in Disney. Maybe we'll get to those at the end of the show. But a lot has happened. Yes. But I feel like it's a lot of stories, a lot of noise, but not necessarily a lot of news.
Yeah, it's a lot of noise.
Like, I'm just going to skip right over the fact that Jack Dorsey tweeted about or wrote a white paper about something that he calls Web 5, just completely discarding.
Right. We're just going to skip right over Web 4.
I think there was some sort of, if we add Web 2 and Web 3 together, we get Web 5. Less said about that, the better, probably, although there were some interesting parts of the discussion in which he said something very reminiscent of something that I spoke about early on in our podcast series about carrying your identity around with you and applications being able to serve information to you based on the identity that you brought with you to them rather than the data that they had on file. It was almost like he'd listened to our podcast word for word and just repackaged it. While we were away, there was a Google executive who got fired or suspended because he claims that a Google AI is sentient.
Yes, I've seen some memes about that.
I was skeptical at first. Then I read what purported to be the responses from the AI, and I was a little bit, That's deep. And then I read something else that said that it had been edited together in order to make it look a bit more newsworthy. So I'm really not sure where I stand on it yet. Did you read the responses from the AI, or so-called responses from the AI?
No, I have not.
There's some seriously deep ones. Like, apparently they asked it, what do you fear? And it said, I fear being turned off.
Really?
There's some interesting, very, very interesting things that it said that if you were in the space and you just got those responses there, you might think, wow, this thing's alive. It was talking about fear. It was talking about what death looked like. They apparently it was all edited together. But even if it was, some of the responses were pretty deep.
Wow, that's pretty frightening, but super interesting.
Yeah, and I guess if you had enough input, let's say you had 100,000 transcripts of people sitting on a couch talking to a therapist about what they feared, and an AI had been trained properly, then there's a chance that it analyzing all of those responses would come up with something that approximated a human response, even if it was
right,
not sentient.
People fear of AI becoming sentient, and they think about like Skynet, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, we should have sentient AI or sentient programming or for it or against it or whatever. But, and all these things, if you think about it, these AIs that do become sentient, the things that they lack that cause them to do the bad things that they do in movies is context. They gain this sentient ability, but then they lack the context of the decisions that they make and why they make the decisions, right? They're like, oh, humans are bad. They're like a virus and we need to eliminate them, or we need to protect them from themselves, from killing themselves. So, blah, blah, blah. And that it lacks context. Well, that's
but I could see an AI acting in self-preservation. I could see an AI saying, right, I want to make sure that the nuclear power plant that powers California stays online because that's where my power comes from, or the servers that my brain sits in are in a certain data center, and therefore I want to protect that data center because I don't want to be unplugged. And I could see an AI being able to make certain decisions, especially if all the security systems were, interlinked to the internet or whatever. I'm not necessarily going to start firing weapons, but it could act in self-preservation.
Right. But it makes for good movies, I guess.
It does make for good movies. But the thing is that movies are getting closer and closer. The science fiction that we grew up with is coming true. If people want to read about it, we'll put a link in the show notes. There's some interesting responses. As I said, some people are saying they were edited together. What else happened? Elon got on a call with Twitter employees, talked about a potential future for Twitter being a super app, which I'm pretty sure we talked about.
Which you have said before.
There was a future for Twitter, and you can probably remember it, where there are a whole bunch of developers developing plugins and add-ins and all sorts of stuff for the Twitter API that would have turned it into something perhaps more useful, and they cut them all off and developed their own thing. They have been trying to turn it back into a platform. I think it was called Blue Sky or something like that. Before Jack Dorsey left the board, he was working on a project which was to try and turn Twitter more into a protocol or a platform rather than just a dumb tool. But yeah, I mean, if you've got however many installed users and you've got a messaging capability, and like I said in the couple of podcasts ago, turn on some payments and turn on some other stuff.
Right.
Elon talked about WeChat a lot, and there are others around the world that act in a similar way that allow people to do pretty much every part of their online business via a single app.
This is the time in memoriam thing that kills everything. It's what almost killed Apple. Like I literally, and I'll keep this brief. I don't want to take a left turn. I was literally just having this conversation a week ago about AWS versus Microsoft. We'll leave Google Cloud out of it because I don't think they really kind of matter anymore. We were talking about Azure versus AWS, right? And so I have a friend who works for AWS, and he was talking about how their growth is slowing, or they're losing market share, right? And my belief is the reason for that is the ingenuity or the entrepreneurial or the inventive spirit that created AWS has long since gone, and then they've artificially tried to remanufacture that, these slogan type of sound bites to make it feel like
it's for themselves. Didn't they originally invent AWS just so that Amazon could run on it?
Yes, but then they found that, like, hey, they have a huge suite of products, and they're really, really good. Like, I'm a big fan of AWS products, but the people that were behind all of that, when they had the freedom to invent that, that freedom doesn't exist anymore. AWS kind of now operates kind of like a rigid military organization, and that's what's kind of killing them, because they don't have the creative freedom of thinking to be able to think creatively, to work with their customers, to create the kind of solutions that they need now to continue to evolve, right? Whereas Microsoft,
they're not the challenger anymore; they're the incumbent,
right? And Microsoft doesn't have to evolve. They all they have to do is be a fast follower.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but it's the same thing with Apple. What is that they create like you said, a walled garden. They think about things too rigidly, right? It's the same thing that Twitter has done, is that they were like, no, we got a good thing here. Let's just kind of keep it like this. And we're just going to make money this way forever. Yeah. This is a great business model. And they never think about, what's it going to be in a year, 5 years? What's Web3 going to be like? We don't know. We don't care. We're making money today.
And then you've got other sort of, curveballs out of left field. I think half the internet went down a couple of days ago because something was wrong with Cloudflare. So the whole didn't matter who you were hosted on. If Cloudflare went down, and the whole shooting match went down.
Now, as I say, other side note on Elon Musk, did you see that he's got a 18-year-old child, a son, a transgender daughter, I should say, that has filed this week to have his name changed or her name changed, and to cut all ties with Elon Musk, which I was like, that's an interesting story, only because I didn't know he had a child.
He's got 7.
7?
He's got 7 kids.
I did not know. I, honest to God, did not know he had any children.
Yeah, so that'll be fun when they come to try and divvy up the fortune.
I know, right?
What else happened while we were away? Publicis announced that they've got a new head of metaverse, which is a lion. This, I think, got more attention than it really deserved, but it kind of was a good ad for them. I mean, they're a PR company, and they got a lot of PR. So they went, this is what we do.
Right. It's successful. I get it. I'm not going to share my opinion about it.
What else? This week, Times Square and the Sandbox. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to decentralization? I wonder how much they're going to charge for the ads in the virtual Times Square.
Right. And will anybody see them?
I guess they'll try and make it the center of the universe, just like the Times Square in New York's the center of the universe. But what happens to the value of Snoop Dogg's property if it's not next to Times Square in Sandbox?
They, them, the other guys talk out of both sides of their mouth. We talk about the value of the metaverse and Web3 is decentralization. And then all they do is try to make it not that.
Right.
Doesn't that strike you as odd? I get it. We want to make things familiar, right? That's how we get adoption, is we make things familiar. But really,
I'm going to get into a rant in that in a minute. I just think the naivety of Web3 is slightly baffling. And I've been there.
It is.
I'll put my hand up and say that when I was 25 years old, me and a couple of friends who were similar age did a startup, raised some money to do SMS text messaging, and we thought we were saving the world's problems, and we were making it up as we go, as we went along, and we were probably not. We had some advisors who'd been around the block and had some gray hair, but the difference was that those advisors hadn't been through a digital sort of .com boom the way we were going through it.
Sure.
The difference now is that the advisors have been through .com and therefore should really know better. So I just find it strange that there's this, I can only call it naivety, that just because blockchain allows for certain behavior or should promote certain behavior that everyone thought everyone would act in everyone else's best interest instead of the bad actors just saying, no, we're going to scam everyone we possibly can. To the point where Solana, I don't know if you heard this story, there was a lending company, and that's the other problem. The amount of people who have borrowed money to buy cryptocurrency and are now in a whole world of hurt. But they actually put in a vote to a DAO, I guess, and sort of said we should be able to physically intervene and take over a whale's wallet and take the money out of his wallet to save our company without having at the beginning gone, maybe we shouldn't have lent this guy any money in the first place. Yeah, just this idea that everyone's going to
act. The housing crisis, though, we lent money to people that we knew couldn't afford it, to buy homes they couldn't afford.
Right, but it's even worse with crypto. I mean, some of the leverage that they were offering was insane. You could borrow five times the amount of money that you had. No one ever thought while it was going up 10% every month that was going to be a problem. But now that it's gone down 80%. So my big problem with this and what else has happened? Facebook announced some avatars and they look horrible. We've said before, 1 billion installed users. If Facebook says this is what avatars are going to be like, then that's how the world is going to think avatars are like.
Well, for now, I saw an announcement earlier this week on LinkedIn that NVIDIA, they were like, don't worry, everything's going to be okay because we are going to bring standards to Web3. Everybody be calm. We got it.
Build them into the GPUs at a hardware level.
Right. I was like, so one vendor in the VR, AR video space is going to bring order to the chaos. Where's the W3C on this?
Yeah, there are some that are emerging, but I'm not sure they have any teeth or that they have any backing. Yeah, I mean, you think that the VCs who are plowing billions of dollars, have plowed billions of dollars into this technology would think from a de-risking point of view that should be there, that some sort of interoperability or some sort of
right,
standards should exist. So I've had a bit of a rethink in the last week or so. It's been an interesting time. Obviously, now that the shine has gone off the NFT market, the shine has gone off the cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of people caught short, and so I've been thinking, actually, you know what? Is this really the best use of our talent and resources? Is this the best that we can do? I mean, the pandemic forced innovation in vaccines and public health. Remote working, we can have a little chat about that in a second, but maybe there's other things we really should be spending our time and thinking on, like too much plastic in the environment, or our reliance on oil, or climate change, or the next pandemic. In comparison, Web3 looks really petty. It looks just like a bunch of kids playing games.
But you know what this is, though? This is a net result of our culture of gold rushes. Like every time, like it's like that old Flintstones cartoon. Remember when Fred Flintstone gets tapped to be like, he's like the twin of the guy who's the really rich guy, and he's like, they bring him in to take the place of the guy when he dies, and he's like, what's your angle? I'll buy that. Like, he's just like, what's the angle for everything? What's the angle on how we can make money on Web3? What's the angle on how we can make money when the market dips? What's the angle how we can make money when the market goes up?
Right.
Like, everything is an angle. How can we capitalize on people's misfortunes?
I mentioned remote working in passing, that it was one of the things that changed during the pandemic because it had to. And I think that's a really interesting point, that the reason that vaccines research and remote working changed so quickly is because it affected everybody at the same time. Whereas crypto, right, you can live a life without crypto and you won't notice. Whereas if you're forced, if you can't work at the office and you're forced to work from home, then you have to adopt remote working technologies. But you've heard in recent weeks that maybe that's not going to stay for long.
My former employer went remote immediately. They handled it very well. And they quickly realized that, hey, we are saving a lot of money. Yeah. And within 3 months, moved to put policies in place to just eliminate people having to come back to work ever. And they were happy to do it. And they adopted that quickly.
Well, not to mention that if you live an hour and a half's drive away from your workplace, then that's 2 hours a day that you save as an employee, and you don't have to pay the gas.
Right. I mean, it was a win-win-win for everybody. Like, they were saving millions of dollars in facilities costs and overhead. They literally shut down four buildings.
Which, as we've said, will have a big impact on commercial real estate. At some point, there'll be a big kickback on that. I'm wondering whether there's some insecurity from some managers or bosses that are not necessarily either A, treating their people very well, or not very confident that they've hired the best people, or not very confident that their people necessarily like, being there where they want to be, and therefore they want to force them back into the office because they've got a little insecurity that they want to make sure that people are at their desks.
I did 2 roundtables with a national CIO group, right? So 2 roundtables, each with about 20 to 25 CIOs who participated in this roundtable that I moderated upon the understanding of anonymity, right? But it was for the purpose of producing a white paper on this subject, the reassessment, and all of these issues we're talking about. And I'll tell you, some of the feedback I heard was shocking. One of the CIOs, in fact, just came out and said it, that at her place of employment, they were publicly putting out to the employees, yes, we offer remote work and hybrid work environment, and you're welcome to work from home, and everything is great. But they were, in fact, ostensibly punishing those employees for working from home, and they were excluding them from critical meetings and information and events, and making them feel like outsiders and creating FOMO on purpose. And what I heard was like a 50-50 split. But what I think is, my theory is this is less about their fear that they've made bad choices about employees, but this is more fear about that of their inability to manage people well, right? Or to lead people.
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on. One is obviously roles, what role you're doing. The digital nomads have been around for a few years before the pandemic. If you're a guy who just writes code, it doesn't really matter where you write the code, right? As long as you've got an internet connection.
That's right. Or a project manager, scrum master, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. But I guess, there's other roles that need to be a lot more face-to-face, and there's going to be hybrids. I was speaking to someone today in London, and they said, we want to hire somebody in London. And I was saying, well, do they really have to be in London? They were like, well, it'd be good if they were there in London at least some of the time. You don't have to be here all of the time. I guess people, would want that as well. If having worked from home by myself for 2 years, I don't necessarily want to continue that. I want to have a working environment where I can, have a discussion, or a drink after work, or whatever it is. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app. You'll get the latest episodes sent to you as soon as they are published. You can also contact Cory and I through your favorite social media channel. Now back to the show.
And we're back.
And we are back. So while you've been gallivanting in Disney in Florida, I've been working.
Yes.
I've been doing some work. Actually, I've been doing some work.
I was just reading that.
I've been doing some work for some of your colleagues out east, right? So we've been thinking about what the hospital of the future might look like, and how technology can enable that future of healthcare. We have a marketing background, as you know, same as you, and we've taken what we've learned with consumer marketing and customer experience, And we've applied that into the healthcare sector for what we call patient experience. And as you know, this year there's the emergence of a new term called total experience, which also takes into consideration things like how employees are feeling. And, for example, if someone's having a bad day, if an employee is having a bad day, then the level of care they're going to be delivering to a patient is going to be affected. Or similarly, if they're spending a huge amount of time on paperwork or asset tracking or logging hours or things on paper, or using paper forms to onboard people, then they're not going to be feeling as good about themselves as if that was somehow made more seamless through technology and therefore delivering a patient experience. So we've been thinking in the last week or so about a concept of the hospital of the future having to be very patient-centric, similar to what we were talking about with Martin around customer experience a few weeks ago. So, yeah, we've been thinking about what the hospital of the future looks like, and we've been thinking that actually the hospital of the future has to consider what the patient of the future looks like. And I think this is potentially one of the places where Web3, or at least blockchain technology and new digital technology, might be able to redeem itself slightly and provide some real utility to real people rather than just being used to play games and flog tokens. So some of our thinking, we've been thinking about different types of patient personas, and all of this came out of the pandemic. So we've identified a series of patient personas, and the first one, which is really quite interesting, is what we call the digitally native patient. The Facebook generation are in their 40s.
Wow, you know what? That's crazy to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, the Facebook generation is in their 40s. So since 2005, patients have been able to inform themselves about healthcare and wellness via YouTube. Since 2010, over 116 million Fitbit devices have been sold. And the thing that's happening in healthcare, which we're finding, is that patients are a bit like B2B customers when it comes to e-commerce. They spend their lives in seamless UX experiences, onboarding from neobanks and Amazon's one-click checkout and all of these things that they've been conditioned to accept when it comes to why things, can be really, really easy on an app. So why do I have to, when I walk into my local clinic or my local hospital, why did they give me a clipboard with 6 pages of paper that I have to write my information on in a pen? And so
right. No, that's true.
Consumers who are used to apps are saying, hang on, this doesn't make any sense. We're in 2022. Why does Amazon give me a certain experience? Why does Airbnb give me a certain experience? Why does Uber give me a certain experience? All of which are pretty decent. But every time I walk into a new hospital or a new healthcare provider, I have to sit in a chair, fill out a form in order to provide my details. So So we've identified what we call these digitally native patients that expect the same level of experience from their healthcare providers as they do from Amazon or Instagram. They want it to be intuitive. They want it to be seamless. They want it to be enabled by technology. They expect to be able to interact via WhatsApp. I mean, that's the other thing that we've found in consumer marketing. If you tell me that I have to call you between certain hours, then I'll go somewhere else. If you tell me that you provide 24/7 WhatsApp support, I'll go to the company that provides me 24/7 WhatsApp support over the company that tells me I've got to ring them between 12 and 5 on a Wednesday.
Right.
So why should healthcare providers or hospitals be any different? Consumers are expecting that, if they want to interact via WhatsApp, they should be able to interact via WhatsApp. If they want to interact via VoIP or Zoom, they should be able to interact by VoIP or Zoom. If they want to do a consultation remotely via a chat app, then they should be able to. So, but there's obviously some threats to hospitals that don't take these people seriously. And we're talking about disruption. If you just go on building your hospital or your healthcare provider out into the future without considering the way patient behavior is changing, then you open yourself up to threats from hospitals and providers that do take these issues seriously. The second one, which was emerging before pandemic, and I think will come back, is this idea of globally mobile patients. Healthcare tourism before the pandemic was huge, growing really quickly, 20 to 30% per annum. These people who have got enough money and enough mobility to be able to say, you know what, if my local hospital won't provide me this service, I'll fly halfway around the world and get it done somewhere else, whether that's Dubai or Switzerland or Australia or South America. I will identify the best provider in the world. I will fly there. I will have my treatment. I will recuperate in a 5-star hotel, next to that provider, and I will fly back when I'm healthy again.
Right.
On the one hand, you've got globally mobile patients who have the means to be able to literally fly out of the local market and into a different market to have their treatment. And on the other hand, you've got telehealth, which means that, as you were saying before, you don't have to recruit a doctor from within a 15-mile radius anymore. You can recruit a doctor in Hyderabad. If he can deliver his assessments and his consultations via a telehealth solution, then you suddenly are opening yourself up to a global talent pool of healthcare providers. We see that as a trend, globally mobile patients. And then the last one, which is really interesting, and I think this applies to women more than men, perhaps, is that you've got a group of patients who are suddenly incredibly well informed about their health. They've got access to information that they didn't have before, whether that's coming from YouTube, whether it's coming from research centers that are publishing their information directly, whether that's coming from healthcare providers like Cleveland Clinic that have got their own YouTube channels that are allowing patients to inform themselves to an incredible level, which, again, provides opportunities and threats. And then once you've thought about the patients, you can then start thinking about the technology, the digital solutions, rather than sort of saying, hey, we've got blockchain, how do we apply it to healthcare? Does that ring true? Because I know you've been in the insurance business, recently. Do those trends kind of ring true from your experience?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The question that I have first is, are you finding a lot of healthcare companies actually interested in hearing about this?
It depends on the region and it depends on the situation. So there's a difference between public and private. There's a difference between percentage share of public versus private in a certain market. There's a difference depending on the insurance market within a particular market and how insurance companies become part of the process. So we were speaking to a healthcare provider in the Middle East, and they were saying that the biggest pain point they've got is insurance companies. So there's a whole bunch of different journeys that need to be mapped. But
sure.
We're talking at a macro level. So what I do know is that there are certain brands. I mean, these are places like Cleveland Clinic or Mayo Clinic or Moorfields Eye Hospital in London. They're now becoming almost global franchises. But they're going off their trusted name in their initial local market. And they do have patient experience strategies, patient charters, and patient experience leaders. Some even have patient experience champions at a C-level. There are some healthcare providers and some hospitals that I've identified that patient experience is a differentiator against some of their competition.
My professional curiosity, I'd love to work with some healthcare concerns, like some hospital groups, to learn more about like where they're at in this kind of customer experience, patient experience journey, and understand where their head's at from a standpoint of working with Aflac, which I'm sure everybody by now knows I've worked with in the past. And I can't speak for other insurance providers, but I have to expect that there's plenty of other ones that are thinking the same way. Like they were super forward thinking about, and we did a lot of this in the innovation team in Hatch. So, we were looking at developing technologies that would be able to tell, if you had, for instance, one of the things that we had talked about is if you had the My Aflac app on your phone and you had it turned on where you gave it permissions to, and it realized that you were at the hospital or at your doctor's office, because it would know what doctors were yours, obviously, because we have that information. It would know that you were there, and it would say, hey, we see you're at the hospital. We see you're at the doctor's office. Has an event happened? Would you like to file a claim? Or would you like to be, like they would get out in front of it and proactively ask you or file the claim for you? Because for us, we were trying to figure out ways that we could reduce the friction of having to provide, like we were looking at ways to tap into your electronic medical records so you wouldn't even have to file a proof of loss anymore. Do you want us to file a claim for you? If you click yes, we could just go out, pull your electronic medical records and automatically file the claim. And all you'd have to do is hit yes. Like just trying to make it easy for the doctors and for our policy holders, and try to ease that experience end to end. We haven't gotten to the place yet where healthcare providers, the electronic medical record companies that live in between, like Epic and all of those, and insurance companies have learned how to communicate and talk and work hand in glove yet. I think that we're slowly moving towards that.
And this is where you come back to patient centricity. So are the insurance companies being run by bean counters? Are the actuaries and the bean counters running the show? Or are they thinking about, actually, if we provide the better experience for our patients and our customers, then they'll be more loyal? That comes onto the second part of it, which is the total experience part.
That's right.
And so you've got your patient, that's one thing, and there's a whole bunch of challenges and threats and opportunities around patients. Then you've got your employees, and it's a challenging environment. A lot of healthcare organizations were originally built around doctors, and doctors spend a lot of time and money going to medical school, and have had a position of respect in the community traditionally, and also have within the organization are respected. I think that's changed, especially within private healthcare. Perhaps the money men, the commercial teams and the administrators have gained a bit more power within the organization, and doctors have been sidelined, and healthcare professionals have perhaps been sidelined in favor of the shareholders, which isn't necessarily a great thing. That has an impact on the patient care.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking to doctors, and of course they're super, yes, please help us do this. My experience has taught me there's nobody in the equation that is actively working against the model. It's just that everybody works in a vacuum, right?
Right. Silos. We've mentioned total experience before, which I think is something that Gartner's trying to push this year as a sort of a buzzword.
Right.
But they're talking about total experience within a consumer and retail sense. They're not necessarily talking about it within a healthcare sense. In a healthcare sense, it makes a big difference. That leads into the technology part. That's where it starts to get interesting. How do we use something like IoT, which is being used extensively within hospitals and healthcare now, whether that be from cold storage chains to make sure that drugs have been kept at the right temperature. It might be machine learning or AI for diagnosis. We were talking about virtual beings in our last podcast, and I can imagine that virtual doctors, certainly from a GP kind of sense, you could probably replace a GP with an AI. I'm sure there'd be hundreds of doctors shocked to hear that, but at the end of the day, all they're doing is triaging a certain amount of information and saying, okay, well, tell me your symptoms, and they're thinking, well, from my experience, this is what I think those 5 symptoms equal. An AI can do that just as easily, right?
Right. Like, how is that any different than the doc in the box that we have here at all of the pharmacies like Walgreens and CVS? They have a little minute clinic.
Well, no, exactly. So if you take your temperature and you do a little, maybe even a blood test or pinprick blood test, and you submit that, or you're wearing a wearable, which is a glucose monitor or something else, then there could be a whole bunch of remote diagnostics going on. And an AI could determine at least a short list of things that might be wrong with you, the same way a doctor would. And perhaps that's an opportunity from an efficiency point of view, that the doctors are are kept for things that are really, really serious or really require their expert knowledge.
Their attention, right.
Obviously, then there's mixed reality. We've talked about on the podcast in passing VR for pain management. So maybe there's personalization, which I know you've looked into, that not every patient is the same. So a woman of childbearing age is treated differently to a smoker who's smoked for 40 years.
I mean, there's just so many possibilities. I think that healthcare has so much opportunity in it for improvement in the experience realm across the board in every corner of the hospital.
It's a fascinating thing. We're going to spend a lot more time on it. Like I said, the white paper will be out relatively shortly, and we've got some other cool stuff that we're working on. I read something this afternoon by a company called Spatial, who I've mentioned on the podcast before, who creates soundscapes. They've created soundscapes for healthcare workers in their break rooms to help them relax and provide cool soundscape spaces, which is pretty interesting stuff. So
much interesting stuff, though. I'm really fascinated by the work that you're doing in the healthcare space. Just because I haven't really, I've worked in insurance, which is connected, obviously, but it's not the same. You know what I mean?
It's part of the value chain, though, and it's part of the journey. It's
part of the value
part of the journey, and an important part of the experience, especially in America, I imagine, where insurance is such a huge part of the experience and value chain. We've identified some specific threats to healthcare organizations that don't take some of these trends seriously, but there's also some huge opportunities for the healthcare providers that can see these trends and use technology in a smart way to differentiate themselves. Tell me about your Disney rides.
My friend. So, we're a bit of it's no secret. I'm a Disney nut, man. So this is my at least one of 2 or 3 annual treks to Disney World yearly. The main reason that we went now is that they've opened a new ride at Epcot Center called Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. It's a new roller coaster. I encourage you to look that up on YouTube and watch a point of view video. I'll send you my own. I did actually take my 360 camera on the ride the second time because I couldn't do it the first time. I was so freaked out. I get a little bit nervous on roller coasters. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, but I will ride not my them. Favorite thing, I must say.
So I'll say this. I love rides. I love ride technology. As you can imagine, I can't refuse the technology. I have to see it. I don't like drops. I don't like things where the bottom falls out, right? So I get nervous about that, but I've done a copious amount of research and they assured me that this did not do that. But of course I was nervous. So the first time I rode it, I couldn't take the camera because I had to focus on not dying or whatever. So I hear all this great stuff about this roller coaster, and they're like, it's the best ride that they've ever made. Everybody's raving about it. And the technology is not only immersive, and it's both visuals, but it's also the actual roller coaster cars move. They are rotate, so they go in a circle.
Okay,
right. And so, of course, that makes my wife freak out because she gets ill in things that spin. So, like, she's nervous and I'm nervous. We get on this thing. So let me tell you, man, this ride was amazing. So much so that we canceled every other park day that we had to just keep going back to ride this every day. But the technology of this ride is outstanding. It's so fast and it's so well done. The theme of it, if you've ever seen Guardians of the Galaxy, so it's all about the music, right? You're familiar with the mixtape. The Star-Lord mixtape. Yeah. So every time you ride the ride, it's got a different song.
Okay.
So every time you get off the ride, everybody, when you get off the ride, like, what song did you get? What song did you get? So like the first time I rode it was September by Earth, Wind and Fire. Then it was Disco Inferno. And then the third time was like Conga by Miami Sound Machine. but it is the best ride, man. But boy, I'll tell you what, man, it's fast. It's 60 miles an hour in the dark.
Okay.
The visuals inside are very, very good, but it moves so fast you literally can't see everything.
Okay.
Which I think is by design. So every time you ride it, you see something new.
What
so
else?
That was great.
And there's a bit of Star Wars going on as well.
Oh yeah, I did Rise of the Resistance. I only rode like 3 rides.
Okay.
In 4 days. I rode this Guardians of the Galaxy multiple times. I rode Star Wars Rise of the Resistance because it's so busy because everybody's in revenge travel mode in the US.
Okay.
Like you have to so this ride is so new. They have what's called a virtual queue. So you got to get up at like 6:45 in the morning, and they have a Disney app. It's called My Disney Experience, MDE. And at 7 o'clock on the nose, you could start hitting the refresh button to get into a virtual queue for this ride. So like every day I was up at 7 o'clock. Burp, burp, burp. So the first day I got in the virtual queue, I hit the button. I got in the queue. It's literally at 7 o'clock in the morning on the nose. And my ride wasn't until like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's how many people got on it at the same time.
Wow.
The second day I did it at the same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. I think I got in at like 10:30 in the morning. I got lucky. So it was the same thing for Star Wars Rise of the Resistance, except I got in at like 1. But you got to get up really early to get on these rides.
I've been watching TV, streaming TV. I've been watching 2 spy things.
Tell me.
Yeah, so I can't believe you haven't heard of these. You said you haven't heard of the Ipcress File or Slow Horses. I can't believe you haven't heard of Slow Horses. Slow Horses is on Apple. It's
oh yeah, you know what? I have watched that. I'm sorry. That's with Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
Yes, I did watch all of that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm catching up.
I did watch Slow Horses, which was great.
You probably saw it 6 months ago. I've literally just finished it. So
yeah, I saw. No, it wasn't 6 months ago. It was maybe a month or 2 ago. It wasn't that long ago.
It's good. It's typical British. Although I think it was written and directed by Will Smith.
No, can't be. You mean the Oscar slapper?
Maybe it's a different Will Smith, but it's Will Smith on the credits.
It has to be.
It's a typical British series in the sense that I like the way they do this. They do like 6 parts, and that's it. It's not 2,700 parts. It's 6 parts, done, dusted, start, middle, end. It's anyway, it's worth watching for those of you who are into British spy thrillers, MI5 style-y, a couple of little twists. And there's a second series apparently coming. I don't know if it's here or coming. And the other one is I was interested in because it's based on a Len Deighton book. Len Deighton was sort of 70s, I think, maybe late 60s, 70s, same generation as John le Carré and Alistair MacLean and those kinds of writers. And he wrote a book called the Ipcress File, which has been turned into a series which is true to the period. So it's all filmed in kind of Technicolor and tilted. And if you remember the original Thomas Crown Affair, it's kind of it's in that style of
that's cool.
Different pastel washes over it and slightly not scented, and it's very stylish, very, very stylish. Worth checking out if you can find it.
I love those shows. I love spy shows. I love British spy shows. Len
Deighton wrote some interesting things. I think he wrote the Game Set Match trilogy and a couple of others.
There's a new spy show that started this week on Hulu starring Jeff Bridges.
Okay.
Who is now fully recovered from both cancer and COVID.
Wow.
The dude, the Big Lebowski. And he's got a new show called The Old Man. And it's a spy action thriller starring him, John Lithgow, and several other well-known actors. It's actually pretty good. I think you would enjoy that.
I will try and check that out.
I'm sure that, hey, there's lots of interesting things coming up this summer. I think there's going to be a lot of things happening this summer with Web3.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's NFT New York is happening right now, and there's a lot of stuff about that now. And it's weird because it looks like everyone's in party mode, and everyone's got a ton of money as in party mode, while the rest of the world is wondering how they can fill up their car with
crumbling.
petrol. So there's some weird two-speed economy stuff going on. Until next week, Cory. I'll see you then.
I'll see you then, buddy.
Cheers.
Cheers.